City of Stevens Point Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission meeting, recorded January 28, 2025.
Oh, let me just unmute this, put my video on. All right, now you're good.
All right, the time is 6 o'clock. We can start the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission meeting.
So with the roll call.
Item number one, roll call.
Sure.
Here.
Guthrie?
Here.
Balderschweiler?
Here.
Johnson, I know he'll be coming in a few minutes late, and then Peterson.
Here.
All right, we got a form.
Item number 2 is report of the December 17th, 2024 meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission.
I can move approval if that's what you're seeking, Chair.
Sure, yeah. I'll
Sorry.
second. All right, I forgot.
Peterson, Guthrie, and Peterson.
Yep.
Yep, so.
Then we just need a motion.
vote. Yeah, a motion to.
Sorry, all those in favor?
All those in favor? That's the word I was looking for. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Item number 3, discussion on a draft bicycle parking ordinance.
All right. Thank you, Chair. So last month, we talked at length looking at the first draft of the revised bicycle parking ordinance. Ultimately, there were a number of comments that this commission had that was incorporated as part of this second draft included in the packet this evening. So some of the kind of the Spark Notes version of what the changes were with the second round is included on page 5 of the packet and on the screen. That would be first to address bicycle parking facility standards when a parking area is resurfaced versus reconstructed, so providing that difference between the two scope of works. Number 2, adding the lighting criteria, making sure that it's well lit and visible during non-daylight hours. I did look at a number of communities, and I think this was intentional. They didn't add a specific foot candle number saying you have to have this light of this amount of intensity or more. They kept it more flexible, open-ended, saying that it has to be well lit and visible during all non-daylight hours. So I went with that. I know it leads to a little bit of administrative discretion. You know, ultimately, since this would be included in our zoning code, there is the ability of a property owner to appeal a determination of mine before the Zoning Board of Appeals if they feel it is well lit and I differ. So there is still that appeal mechanism in place if with this more open-ended definition. Third edit would be amending the separation requirements between a bike parking facility and the front entrance to the building. So dropping that down from 150 to 120 feet to 50 feet in order to be consistent with the federal standard that was identified that we talked about last month. Number 4 would be to add the requirements for covered or indoor bike parking requirements based off of the type of land use. So what I had included in here was break it down by zoning district. That I felt was the most, that was the easiest way of trying to differentiate between higher intensity land uses versus lower intensity. So the higher intensity land uses, the B4 commercial, B5 highway commercial, or industrial zoning districts, those are generally prone for higher intensity land uses versus that of like your neighborhood serving businesses, which would be the opposite of that. Next one would be to include the graphic of really outlining some of the bike parking design standards. That would be on page 9 of the packet. Next one, second to last one, would be add a picture of a corral as a permitted bicycle rack design. That is located on page 10. And then lastly, going through the parking table, there were some edits made. One to the land use for terminals. So again, this seen this pretty frequently for a number of communities where they use 3.5% of the projected maximum daily ridership as the metric to gauge how much bike parking would be needed. I'm not necessarily sold on that 100%. So, if there's perspectives that this commission has that's contrary to that, I'd be happy to hear so. And then lastly, with parks and open spaces, I did have a conversation with our parks director, Director Kramer. He is definitely open and willing to have the conversation in about 2 years' time or so when we have to start the planning work for the comprehensive outdoor rec plan update. So for that next core plan, we'll kind of do more of a deep dive with this commission and our Parks Commission to really hone in on what parks should be prioritized with bike parking, how many for those given parks, just to try to get a little bit more specificity within that outdoor rec plan. So
All right.
that's kind of the summary of it. With that, I will kick it back to the chair or any other folks to start the discussion.
Any discussion or comments?
On the lighting, you said that, a lot of times it might be up to discretion of, is there a way of following up or, because some people might just not really put much thought into how well lit it should be or not,
Yeah, so I guess my approach would be I would use a number internally. Ultimately, when new developments come in, they have to submit a photometric plan that outlines the land use intensity. Say my metric is 1 foot candle or more being required.
Okay.
That I'll use that as a hypothetical. That would be my internal metric. With that said, if there's future zoning administrators, they may have a different metric,
Yeah.
right? That's, unfortunately, the problem that arises when you have turnover for folks who have to regulate a code is that there's some degree of administrative discretion interwoven within it. So.
Okay.
I guess on the terminals, so we're mostly specifically thinking of the future bus station downtown, because that's going to be the terminal, right? If we don't have one currently. So, do you know what 3.5 of that location is at the moment?
An exact number, I don't. In part because there would be some, as far as I'm understood, there'd be some consolidation of certain bus stops that would be included as part of this transit center. So it's hard to estimate personally. I mean, if you want a more concrete number, I can ask for sure, but
Not worth it? No.
They're
It'd be
not.
hard to-
They're not gonna know. It's my sense that if they have some of the Megabus or the Van Galder buses using that, that wouldn't be permanent. So it's going to, number one, fluctuate by season, will depend on who they have contracts with from regional bus servicers, Greyhounds, things like that. So I don't think we can get that answer to your question right now, and I don't think it will be permanent.
Okay, that kind of gives me the follow-up of how do we even know if we don't know at all how much is going to be going through there?
That's a good question, right? So
Yeah.
how do they plan if they don't even know themselves? Yeah.
good question. Unfortunately, I mean, my hunch is you probably look at trends in, they collect data on a daily basis for ridership. They look at trends year over year to see, to really try to manipulate the data to try to forecast in the future what the anticipated ridership would be going forward. Yeah, it'd be tough to speculate a more concrete number.
Okay, and then maybe my last question is, are we factoring at all the fact that this is a downtown hub and not just people using the bus could be using that as a bike parking area, like employees downtown or people going out?
So, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was going to be one of the updates I was going to have later on. At least my perception of it would be that the bike parking facilities would be more associated with the transit users. With that said, ultimately, it's up to how far someone is willing to walk from the bike parking facility to their destination, right? If you're only talking a block, personally, I would be willing to walk that, but I think it would be up to user determination.
For me, it would also depend on if it's covered or not,
Yeah.
Sure.
right? So if I'm going to Goose, and there might be rain in the forecast, and the parking spots right out front of Goose are not covered, but the terminal is a block away and it's covered, that's where my bike is going.
Good point. Good point. Any other comments, questions?
Well, if we can back up to some of your summary, I really appreciate how much you've made updates. They feel thoughtful and inclusive and reasonable, and especially when it comes to covered parking and repaving projects, right? It just feels like this is a really thoughtful draft to put forward. I'm grateful for your work on this and taking all of our ideas and getting them summarized and implemented in an actual document for shopping around to some of the future committees that will consider this. I want to commend your work.
That's what I'm here for.
Just doing my job.
That's right. Awesome. Any other thoughts, questions? If not, I guess my plan of attack, or I guess before I get to that, is there any other overarching issues that you see with this, or is the folks in the room generally comfortable with what's presented?
Yeah, comfortable.
Okay. So I guess with that, what I'll do is, at some point in the near term, it probably won't be February Plan Commission. I'm going to want to kick this over to that commission to begin the deliberation. I'm not going to have this commission take action on this yet, because the reason so is that I want the Plan Commission to take a look at it. If there's revisions that they're requesting, I'm like to keep you folks up to speed. Ultimately, when we get to a point where you folks are comfortable as a Bike Ped Commission and our Plan Commission, then we'll start the formal approval process. You would take action first, then Plan Commission, then Council. So.
Okay.
They'll have a great perspective because they work more closely with land use and developments and developers and things like that. So many of them are developers on that commission. So as a layman biker, I love what we have presented, and I can't wait to hear their insight and feedback.
So I'll keep you posted, you folks posted as to what month they'll be on the Plan Commission agenda, just in case if any of you wanted to attend. So.
Awesome. Next item?
Yeah, we'll just need you to read it.
Yep.
Sorry.
Item number 4, review of the 2024 bicycle and pedestrian count.
I'd like to give kudos to the chair for reminding me last meeting that I did not present the data to you folks yet. So, apologize for not getting to this sooner. I will be blunt. I forgot. So every year, as folks on the commission know, we do our yearly bike ped count. This is really valuable data for myself as a planner in the room, as well as our public works department to really use year-over-year data to try to better forecast where we should invest our dollars for bike ped, our future bike ped accommodations. So included on the screen and in the packet, I have the data that was collected for the 2024 bike ped count. The yearly counts always happen above the second or third week of December, always during the 3:30 to 5:30 time slot to keep consistency year over year, that we're not creating more statistical statistical errors.
And I think you meant September, not December, yes?
Yes.
Did I say December?
You did, I think.
I heard December.
That was
I'm in
the
the winter
puzzled look I
mindset.
was, yeah, that's okay.
I heard it too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm in the winter mindset, and my brain's a little foggy. So ultimately, appreciate it. So we have the data on the screen here. So just wanted to have the initial conversation with you folks if there's any observations that you had from the data. I know there are some from my perspective, both positively and negatively in terms of the data that was collected, but want to kick it back to the crew first. Any initial observations for the 2024 data? And if you had a chance to look at the historical data at these locations over the last 10 years, happy to hear any trends that you folks are seeing. So, then I'll open the floor for conversation.
I don't know, I was just gonna say, I was on Franklin and Division, and that clearly has the most counts this year. I was really curious about that because right next to it is the controversial Fourth and Division, which had a lot less pedestrians and bicyclists, and I think one of the reasons it's good we do this is once the remodel of that road happens, the reconstruction, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, how that'll affect those two intersections next to each other for our bicyclists and pedestrians.
Good point, good point.
I did have people try to stop and talk with me about their feelings about that corner.
During the count?
During the count, yes.
And did you say, I'm counting?
I gave my information. I was like, I'd love to talk about it, but I gotta count people. There's a lot of them.
Stop bothering me.
There was a lot of them, though.
Well, I think it's so important to collect this data and to mark where transitions in our roadways, including bike lanes or updates to intersections, happen and how we see trends changing. I represent a district that includes Stanley Street. Before my time as Alder, Stanley Street was in the news and in conversation at the city government level a lot for the proposed bike lanes, and there, as I understand it from my predecessor, a lot of controversy about whether or not they were needed. So I was heartened to see so many people using that bike lane, presumably commuting to and from where they needed to go during that transition day in their day. It did, however, bring up to me that we've identified some unsafe intersections in our community that are heavily used day to day, and sometimes it takes years to make updates to those intersections to help them feel more safe, Minnesota and Stanley being one of them. It was identified a couple years ago during our comp plan neighborhood meeting that it was unsafe. We've continued to surface that, and it continues to not be in the plan for any sort of updates that I am aware of. So the data collection is so important over time, and also the cogs of bureaucracy to attend to things that are noted as heavily used and concerningly unsafe. It still doesn't move very quickly. So thank you for your efforts, and if there are ways that this commission can raise those concerns, surface them in different places or more loudly, I welcome that feedback from staff.
Yeah, I think one great opportunity for that is sometime next month, the first draft of the countywide bike ped plan rewrite will be presented. I can all but guarantee a good number of these intersections will be identified in the plan. Ultimately, it'll be a process where this commission and ultimately the council will need to adopt their portion of the plan. But I think that would be the onus of this commission. You're having the heightened conversation now of specific intersections and specific improvements that we want to seek at those intersections. We went through all the effort. Now's the time to really put pen to paper, put dollars to locations, and really starting to see the fruits of our labor with this plan. So I think that would be one short-term goal we could do.
Great.
So.
Thank you for that feedback.
I have a question. Did you at one point change what time this was being counted at? Because I know when I would take my kids to school, I saw somebody sitting out there and counting. So they were counting people going to and from school across Jefferson Division. But now when we do it, it's past that point when kids would be crossing. So I'm just curious how that could affect the data.
At least my time here with the city, the last 5 years, we've always done it during the 3:30 to 5:30 slot. I'm not sure.
I thought there used to be two.
There was one year where.
One early or one later.
Oh, maybe that's when I saw it.
This was under my. It was when my predecessor was here. This was maybe 2018, 2019. So they did it one day where, to be frank, the weather was not great. And that really skewed the data. So he decided to do a second count and try to mesh the two data points together.
Oh, that's probably when I saw them.
Data together at each location, so.
I did see that last year's. I didn't see it on the website, but it was also a stormy day, so low numbers.
So we have a new GIS person who started in our engineering department who started early last week. So that's one of the early tasks that he was doing to edit some of the data. So it wasn't visible, but I'm thinking part of it was just because he's actively working on updating that. So. But yeah, that was the first year in my time where it was not sunny and warm, unfortunately. But any other thoughts? I'll just say my big observation was Jefferson and Division, how few. I know the last couple of years that was always a heavily used intersection. So the fact that last year it was 10 bicyclists, 16 pedestrians over a 2-hour time span, that was a data point that stuck out.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Yeah.
I have friends that live right there, a colleague actually, and their 12-year-old daughter is not allowed to walk across Division there. They drive her across when she has to go across, and I don't know how I would feel if I had children about that intersection.
I don't feel great about it.
Yeah.
I let my kid cross, but I don't feel great about
You
it.
probably walk past there every day.
Yeah.
Or a lot of days.
Yeah, it's great that change is coming, right?
Yeah.
That we hope will create more safety. I don't know if you can talk about Division Street and some of the safety changes in the design that we hope to make bike and ped crossing of Division in general safer. Some of the practices of pedestrian islands or other.
So pedestrian islands was one of them. One idea that's being floated, and this was actually incorporated at the Jefferson Division intersection about a year ago now, was the audible responses for the pedestrian crossings. That's been a goal, at least internally, to add those features to more locations, just to be more equitable for users who are can't hear as well.
Visually
Yeah.
Visually impaired.
Yep. Thank you. Again, my brain's a little fuzzy. So that's one idea. I mean, another option. I'm not sure if it's specifically in this part of the corridor, and I'll touch on this a little bit during the staff updates. Is the installing some urban shoulders to try to reduce the path of travel for pedestrians who's trying to cross the street. Really kind of add essentially a bump out at each of the 4 corners of an intersection. And that would be one strategy. I could go on and on, but those are just a kind of a flavor of some of the things that's been talked about. And, I think if there's interest, I know AECOM's working on the 60% design phase as we speak. If the folks on the commission want to have an update as to bike ped accommodations along that corridor, I'd be happy to invite Director Badoon here one day to kind of give an overview of that to you.
Personally, I feel like there have been certain things in the media or that have surfaced in community conversation about that corridor that are divisive. I think knowing that we're engineering and designing to current best practices in pedestrian and biker safety for, especially for crossing at some of the crossing division, not just going along division, so that we all can amplify that message, talk about what we're looking forward to in that corridor, talk about how we hope these counts will go up and that people will feel more comfortable crossing. We'll be better advocates and members of this commission if we're familiar with some of those key factors in design at those major intersections, so that we can help our neighbors anticipate their inclusion and so that they can get excited about those improvements since they are paying a lot of money for them. So yeah, whether that's at the 60% design or once ground is broken, we can start to talk about that and have some imagery with it. I would really welcome
Me too.
that, yeah?
Absolutely.
What exactly are they going to do at 4th and Division? I've heard varying.
I will have the elders speak to that.
Oh.
That intersection.
You know, I've only been in office for a few months, and so there's a lot of background here that Adam and I are both sort of up on. My understanding right now is that the body that I sit on has approved a roundabout. A one-lane roundabout, and that is what will actually be constructed. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and my full-time job is not street design or budgeting for street design. I just sit at these meetings every now and then in the evenings and hear things and vote on them. But that's my understanding, that if I were a betting woman, I'd say that there's a single-lane roundabout that will be constructed there in a few years. Adam, do I have that?
That's at least being incorporated in the design phase, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately, I believe council still has to do approval for the final. I could be wrong.
I didn't
How is
even
that
know
going to affect the dwellings on the corner? Is there enough room that it'll,
I believe they were gonna have the same amount affected either way, because they have to widen the road for signals, like new signals there as well, is what I was told, right?
I know that we're not using eminent domain to take over as much property with the current design option as compared to other designs. I'm not, there are so many blocks included, and I don't know property by property what's happening with those commercial areas and say they're parking lots, but it's not my understanding that we're using eminent domain to take over
Now, it's
property.
just a Subway, right, where the store was? Isn't it
I
just?
wouldn't say just the Subway. To the owner of that store, I'm sure it's.
Oh, it's a Subway and then it was a newly created vacant.
That's what I mean, though, the building, the only occupied thing is the Subway right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then there's an apartment,
The apartment would have to go either
And,
way, I think.
bank, and then I don't know what's on that other corner.
PT.
There's businesses.
There's
Oh, that's
businesses.
kind of a shopping center.
Yeah.
There's the new
Bubble tea.
boba tea. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I can talk with Director Badoon, and once we get the design phase a little bit more solidified with AECom, I can gladly have them present just to kind of do a recap and get final thoughts from the group. So.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm just glad that they're incorporating more safety into the design, and I'll look forward to being able to name them specifically at different locations so that we can kind of tell that story. Right, construction on a major corridor, as we all learned from a little south by Whiting, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not nothing to live through as a community and for those businesses to live through. And so whatever we can do to lean into what we can look forward to as a community for that cost and for that trouble, and not just revel in all the construction woes and the rerouting woes, I think will be important. Like this body can play a role in that, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
That concludes the data.
Says 5 staff updates.
Yeah.
more?
Right. Let me share and street here. So first off is the demonstration activities for the SS4A grant. So we did, through our subcommittee on the county level, we did approve a number of demonstration activities that I'll go through in a little bit, and we just last week got NEPA approval through the USDOT. I still don't necessarily agree why we need to worry about getting NEPA sign off or demonstration activity, but nonetheless, it's covered. So,
Can you tell us what NEPA is?
so it's the National Environmental Protection Act, I believe is what it stands for. It's basically,
Okay.
you basically have to do an analysis of any infrastructure project, even in this case, since it's temporary and non-physical in nature, to determine what, if any, environmental impacts would be required or would be occurring with that project. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's more common for actual street infrastructure projects. But thankfully, they were pretty quick for doing their review and sign off. So, as part of the demonstration activities, there will be 2 temporary curb extension projects. The first will be I can work this out good, would be the intersection of 4th and Isidore. So Zest obviously is on the northwest corner. So the temporary curb extension would focus on the east half of this intersection. This will be, weather permitting, will be installed in May and will run through October. There is a second temporary curb extension that will be down in the village of Plover, and that would be not that far from city limits, honestly, but it would be Hoover Avenue at kind of where Ramble Lane and Highland Drive intersect.
Okay.
So those would be 2 temporary curb extension projects that will be conducted next year, or later this summer, rather. In addition to that, there will be 2 protected bike lanes that will be installed. Now, this will be using existing buffered bike lanes. Now, these 2 will be both within city limits. The first one being the stretch of Water Street from roughly Quick Trip down to the intersection of Water and Riverview Ave, so kind of roughly this stretch down here on the southbound lane. And then the second one, and this will be more timely since this commission, so I guess before I get to that, so protected bike lane is essentially these flexible delineator posts that would be installed every 10 feet or so in separation, running that whole stretch. So in here, it's just shy over 1,000 feet. So that's going to be the first location. Second location, and this will be more timely for this group, will be Michigan Ave underpass from Patch to Dixon. Recall we did this walking audit of this corridor last summer or fall. So this has a similar setup where we'll be installing those flexible delineator posts within that hashed off area for
Northbound?
the northbound lanes,
Okay.
correct. So those are going to be the 2 locations. And then lastly, I mean, there's none of these in city limits, but just for food for thought for the commission, there'll be some wider edge lines and optical speed bars within various areas outside of the urban core of Portage County. These would be West River Drive, kind of well south of city limits, kind of in it'll be this corridor, this area right here of West River Drive. Second area would be County Trunk G, which would be just south of Marshfield, a little bit south of Marshfield. And then the last location would be County Trunk KK. This would be essentially the on-ramp between Amherst Junction and Highway 10 if you want to go westbound on Highway 10. So all those protected bike lanes and the temporary curb extensions, they're going to, weather permitting, start in May and then conclude in October. So we'll capture both times when school is in session and when school is not in session, particularly for the curb extension project and for the protected bike lane project over by Quick Trip down to along Water Street. So I think we'll get some good data to try to see some differences that exist while school is in session and when it's not in session. So just wanted to give you the update on that. So right now, since we got NEPA sign off now, it's really just the coordination amongst the agencies to really coordinate equipment sharing and whatnot, and really just now being a waiting game until when May rolls around. So Is that any questions before?
Yeah, it's interesting to me the length of the buffer on Water Street. Do you have any insight into why those particular, what am I missing about those blocks or that 1,000 feet that makes that the testing space?
I would say, because I work right there.
Oh, okay.
So I drive that pretty much daily.
Yeah.
I would say there's a lot of kids walking from PJ or from Ben when I get home to school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I drive past there going to City Hall every morning, and there's a ton of kids biking during the warmer weather months, or
And-
biking to school.
They usually, a lot of them bike on the sidewalk right now.
Along Water on the sidewalk, just those couple blocks. Okay.
Next update, so this was privately sent to me last week and was officially announced earlier today. So the bike-friendly community designation, so we did re-up our silver status designation. I'll get a press release out sometime early tomorrow, making that publicly known. I guess the crux for this commission is every time that we get designated by the League of American Bicyclists, we get this report card outlining how we're doing in each of those 5 E's. So next time we meet, I'll provide that report card to you, and we'll kind of do a deep dive as to where this outside nationwide agency deems Stevens Point in each of those areas, which I think this one would be particularly well to have a conversation on the equity component, since this is the first time that we've ever been evaluated on that metric. So,
Right, it's a new metric.
new metric to replace enforcement. So, so that's second one. Third one, so there's been some conversations internally between myself and our downtown business improvement district manager for installing some bike racks in the downtown to better assist with their placemaking efforts. I know, Nana, you messaged me, I think last summer. I think that was
Probably
a good.
a couple times.
Yeah, that was a good, I guess, a good eye-opening experience for me. And you don't really think about it until you're walking downtown, focusing just on one singular issue, and there really isn't a whole lot of bike parking accommodations downtown. And I think the one picture that you sent me of a bunch of bikes scattered along the sidewalk in front of Arbuckles was a good point.
And parking spaces.
And the parking spaces was a good point to show people want to bike there, but if you don't have a place to put it, well,
Yeah.
they're gonna put it somewhere, or choose other modes of transportation. So, I think this is a good opportunity, since it's a good opportunity to try to fulfill some of the wishes from this commission, while also promoting some placemaking efforts that the Downtown Business Improvement District Board is prioritizing for 2025. So, once we get more details solidified, I'll let you know. And then lastly, this will be something I'll have, I know Alder Guthrie, you know about this. This will be something that will be on our Plan Commission agenda for Monday. Was hoping to get it published later today, just lost track of time. But tomorrow morning, or give or take, I'll be sending out the Plan Commission agenda. One of the items on there will be a request to the Plan Commission and Council authorizing staff to rewrite the city zoning code. I say that to this commission only because a zoning code is super broad in scope, right? It covers a lot of topic areas that make up the planning practice, that being housing, transportation, historic preservation, economic development, sustainability, goes on and on and on, right? There are some components to a zoning code that are directly tied to bike ped accommodations, one of them being the bike parking ordinance that we just talked about earlier today. And so the reason I bring this up is, should the council give authorization in mid-February to rewrite the zoning code, think about what are some bike ped practices that you think would be interesting or better suited to be incorporated as part of a new zoning code. I'm not, if you can't think of anything right now or in the days and weeks ahead, that's fine. Just, I wanted to provide that notice to you that, that would be a project potentially coming down the pipeline, and that if there's any new initiatives that you'd like to see bike ped specific that's interwoven in our zoning code, have some food for thought and think about that.
Other than parking bikes, which we just covered, and commuting by bike on roads, which is not covered in ordinances that I know of, can you help us conceptualize of what ideas might be covered by that prompt to think about it? I just don't know what's covered in an ordinance code for a city as well. So nothing other than parking and biking on a road, I can't think of what else would come to mind.
Good question. So there would be some tangible and intangible code sections. Some of the more tangible items would be looking at our subdivision ordinance. So outlining when there's any new subdivisions that are being proposed, either that's city-led or privately led, that would be the time to have some honest conversations with this group, Plan Commission Council, about what metrics, what situations would require the need for either a multi-use path or a sidewalk to be installed. Likewise for bicycle accommodations, kind of more outlining situations where those types of facilities would be required. So that would be more tangible. Some more intangible would be, the detriment we have in a way for Stevens Point is that our zoning code is old compared to many other communities. One practice that's gaining steam in many communities as part of their zoning code rewrites is adopting an illumination ordinance, really an lighting ordinance, kind of similar to what we talked about earlier today, right? I think we all know the context of a well-lit corridor and a person's perception of feeling safe and willing to bike down that corridor. So that would be one example of an intangible improvement to a zoning code. If you have certain illumination standards, downlighting requirements instead of uplighting, to make bicyclists feel more safe to utilize infrastructure that's already in place, that's a possibility to look at. So, not like I'm advocating for or against anything, just for some examples.
No, thank you. It's hard to think about what we would want until later when we don't have it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just say I've been to plenty of city meetings in the past where the subject of putting a sidewalk in or not has been a huge debate, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Because we don't have sidewalks in my subdivision. We don't have sidewalks or streetlights. Lots of people get really crappy about that.
And this is actually something that I mentioned to the folks from Vanderwall for the countywide bike ped plan that I'd like included in the bike ped plan is outlining standards for when a multi-use path would be more favorable to that of a sidewalk, right? And the reason I floated that question / asked to the Vanderwall team was, at least in my time over the last couple of years, I've seen a noticeable shift of prioritizing multi-use paths. One example being the convent building along Maria Drive, where that's a multi-use path instead of a sidewalk. There's pros and cons with either approach, but it'd be helpful, at least when staff is reviewing new street projects, new subdivisions, whichever, to have a more clear-cut barometer to say when should sidewalks be prioritized over a multi-use path or vice versa.
Yeah, not only the conditions under which, but also, do we have a vision for bike commutability in some sort of a grid across our community instead of it being piecemeal and hodgepodge depending on the criteria around that space? Do we have a vision for connectivity by wheel?
Yeah, so I know the internal practice was any streets with a collector street status or above, those would be the corridors prioritized. by and large, most of those streets are going to be interconnected to one another. There's probably a couple that are going to be an island upon itself, but again, that's more internal policy. I think a debate could be had as to if that should be codified in an official city document somewhere.
So that it can actually be budgeted for and prioritized, yeah.
Correct. With that is all the updates that I got.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.